go. All right. So, good afternoon. I am Ruth Lamprecht from Mount St. Mary's in Maryland, and it's an honor to be presenting here at ILSET 2024. My co-authors are Ed Novak, a fellow CS faculty from Franklin and Marshall College in Pennsylvania, and Emily Kisner, a graduate student here at the Mount. This presentation is on our work with categorizing assignments in online repositories. We are educators who want to continue to motivate our students to learn programming through the use of new and interesting projects. This work started as a summer project focused on ACM, SIG-C, NIfTY assignments, but has since expanded to additional repositories. Get my mouse in the right spot. There we go. In this work, we organized existing CS education materials found online into categories by learning objective and conceptual domain. We define the specific learning outcomes and domains with community feedback, and we hope that our curation will help current and future CS educators more easily identify online resources that suit their needs and desires. For this talk, I will start with why this work is of interest to us and hopefully others, then defining the categories we put assignments in, as well as providing a sampling of the assignments we found, and of course, finishing with where we want to go next. This work is motivated by our searches for new materials to use in early programming classes, both to refresh the course for ourselves, as well as to find new ways to engage students in the challenge of learning to write code. The question we attempt to answer is how to relate learning outcomes to online assignments, particularly for CS1 and CS2 courses. Most online repositories are organized more by date of submission than by any other category grouping. Most list the projects by title that gives some indication of the topic of a project, but usually require more in-depth reading to determine what skills a student needs before being able to understand the problem presented, as well as what skills are being practiced in the given project. Prior research does show that open educational resources are more useful when there is a classification system, but organizing them is still a challenge. I want to take a moment to define our use of CS1 and CS2, since that is not a clearly defined course sequence. For this research, we focused on a two-sequence introduction to programming, where the expected start is that students have little or no formal training in writing code, and the expected finish is students can use and create classes to solve object-oriented programming solutions to relatively complex problems, but without extended knowledge of data structures beyond standard arrays or lists. Starting with the learning outcomes we use in our courses and doing some editing after surveying other CS educators, we define 3 learning outcomes for a CS1 course, where a student first learns how to program. The first learning outcome is focused on the idea of thinking like a programmer, to solve problems, but not necessarily by writing a program. The second learning outcome covers the basic structures needed to write a simple program. And the third learning outcome starts to explore the concepts needed for more interesting and realistic programs. We purposefully removed any specific programming language from our learning outcomes to be able to more broadly apply them to various projects. For a second course in computer programming, we define 2 learning outcomes. With the use of object-oriented programming, a student should be prepared for data structures and other higher-level programming, as well as further study in computer science. Given that object-oriented programming is a complex topic, we split it into 2 learning outcomes, with the first focused more on object-oriented design, and the second more on developing classes and exploring the concepts of abstraction, inheritance, and polymorphism. In addition to categorizing assignments by their learning outcomes, we also add a statement on how each project fits into one or more of the following 5 conceptual domains. The logic domain covers projects that focus on problem-solving skills that may or may not involve programming. Projects in the game domain focus on an implementation of a game and generally have a fun or competition aspect. Social impact projects focus on exploring social aspects based on real-world data and applications. Computational projects focus on data analysis or mathematical processes and frequently are part of other domains as the application of the computations. Graphics projects focus on a graphical output that have something more than just having a GUI instead of a text output. Most projects do fall into multiple domains, so there are not exclusive categorizations. As I mentioned earlier, we started with learning outcomes from our courses and then used feedback from an open survey to refine them. The survey was sent out through the listserv of SIGSI, an international collection of people who are interested in computer science education. We received 21 responses from a variety of institutions. 5 schools with undergraduate student populations above 15,000, 5 schools with 5,000 to 15,000 students, and the rest were smaller institutions. About half of the responses were from schools that are primarily urban, and then the rest were split between either primarily rural or primarily suburban. On a scale of 1 to 5, the 5 learning outcomes included in this research were given an average value of importance of at least a 4.0, indicating that others agreed with these as being important learning outcomes to consider. After ranking the surveys, the respondents were asked about their use of online repositories, naming the SIGSI Nifty site that many would be familiar with, as well as listing some others and asking for additional sites used. This gave us several other places to look. We also included an open-ended question for respondents to share other learning outcomes from their courses. While there are many good ones related to tracing code, analyzing efficiency, and general understanding of given code, we opted to not include these in this current work because most of the projects that we have found online have a focus on students developing a program to solve a problem rather than these skills of understanding, which are still important for students to learn and can generally be included in many of the projects. There was also some feedback about the need to consider aspects of AI, but this is a new enough topic that there are not many projects that use AI for completion, and writing programs to be AI are beyond the scope of a CS1 and CS2 sequence. To determine what other repositories to explore, we included in our survey a set of questions listing some repositories we had encountered and asked about the use of entire assignments, referencing assignments for augmenting existing materials, and for resources that were perused or browsed only but not used in any other way. The survey ended with an open question for the other sites that they used in any substantial way, which again gave us the additional repositories to look into. Obviously, there are a lot of CS educational materials available online. In an effort to select assignments that are of high quality and also relevant to the CS Ed community, we focused the majority of our efforts on the SIGSI Nifty assignments from the past 5 years, as well as csedu.org. Other reasonably well-known venues were also considered, and for those interested, we encourage you to read our paper and/or stay after the talk period to ask us about it. One assignment we included for learning outcome 1, which was basic algorithmic use, is a musical dice game published through SIGSI Nifty. This is a project that guides students in thinking through the logic of decision-making based on random outcomes, and it does include pre-built code that students work with. An additional aspect that we tried to capture for each assignment is its flexibility, either in terms of making the project easier or harder to adjust for varied levels of student ability, or in some sort of customization that individual students could apply to make a project more their own. One project we included for learning outcome 2, writing simple programs with basic building blocks, is about analyzing voting data to determine whether there is evidence of gerrymandering in the data. This project gives students a real-world application that they can hopefully connect to while practicing these early skills. For learning outcome 3, one assignment we included is a matching game found on the CSEDU resources site. This is a more complex project designed to engage students in something fun that will allow them to practice building their programming skills, but not diving into complex classes. One of the projects from the SIGSI Nifty we included for learning outcome 4 about using classes and objects examines rising tide data to give students practice with data management. Again, this is a project that is focused on real-world implications. An example of learning outcome 5, using object-oriented programming at a higher level, is a credit card validation project posted on csedu.org. This is a project that requires many of the prior skills and then builds them into something more. Depending on the level an instructor or institution wants to go to with an introductory programming course, there are many other learning outcomes that could be considered. As mentioned earlier, we opted to not include ones that don't have many projects that we could find in online repositories. There are also some general learning outcomes that could be applied to many projects because they don't cover specific programming concepts. All are of interest and could lead to more categorizations in the future. This study presents our categorization of a partial listing of open educational resources. There are many more repositories and assignments available than we could fairly categorize. Some, such as CS POGIL, which is a process-oriented guided inquiry learning, have hundreds of exemplary materials available, with most designed to be used as shorter activities in the classroom. Individually, very few of the materials we found there matched our learning objectives since the lessons were on a very small scale. So another area of future work might be to explore how smaller scale daily learning objectives culminate into larger weekly objectives and then into entire course learning outcomes. We present a process and a curation that will hopefully be helpful to other educators as they look for ways to refresh their courses. Our goal is to keep our students interested with new projects that are relevant and engaging, but to make it easier for educators to do something new. Thank you for your interest and your attention.